Good morning, Dr. Cassera. It's such a pleasure to have you here today discussing your journey into science. Thank you for participating in this new endeavor that we have where we're asking successful scientists like yourself how they went about becoming such a successful person in their scientific field, how they went about reaching their scientific goals. So thank you once again for participating. And Dr. Cassera, would you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I'm born in Argentina, in a small town called Rafaela, in the middle of Santa Fe. Every country has a Santa Fe. When I turned 18, when I finished what is equivalent to the United States, the high school, I moved to the capital of the state, which is Santa Fe, to pursue my undergrad education. And my major, which is the education in Argentina, is a little bit different than here. So my major is biotechnology, but it is equivalent to a master. So let me tell you a little bit how our education works.
Yes,
so you finish high school, and different from here that you go to undergrad to college, where you have a more general education, and then when you graduate, then you finally go to graduate school like medicine, law. In Argentina was that you go straight into the medical school, law school, right after high school.
Oh, wow.
So you design your career right after you finish high school.
And is high school still a four-year period?
It's a five, depends where the school that you're going. You have the technical schools that are 6 to 7 years, or you have the regular high school, which is 5 years.
Gotcha.
It's from the age of 13 to 18. So I already knew what I want to do, which was to pursue science. So I decided to study biotechnology, because that was back into 1995 when I went to college. And at that point, biotechnology was a new field. So actually, I was the third student to graduate as a biotechnology major at that university. So we were like kind of a guinea pig. So we have a lot of classes. Was actually 6 years, my undergrad, and finished with this thesis. That's the reason why it's equivalent to a master in the United States.
But what exactly, what really first made you think about science and that you wanted to be in this biotechnology field? Did you always like science from a little girl, or did something happen that you were like, wow, this might seem something really cool, this is what I want to do?
I guess that I'm born as a scientist.
Oh, I love that answer.
Because since I have memory, I love to search things. My favorite toy was a chemistry game. I love to blow out things around the house. And my mom told me I never liked to play like a regular girl with dolls. Actually use the dolls to make experiments.
Okay.
So I kind of knew since I was born that I want to be a scientist. And actually, now that you ask, during my high school, actually my major goal was to study nuclear engineer, to dedicate it to the medical part. But then, in Argentina, there is only one university where you can pursue nuclear engineer, which is in the Patagonia, in the very south of Argentina. And the reason why I didn't pursue that later on is because to enter to that university is very, very tough. And you need to do 2 years of a basic engineer before you apply to that school. And then I thought, well, what happens if I don't get into that school? Then I will be trapped to the engineer that I selected, and I didn't want to be actually an engineer. I always liked the medical part. So then when the biotechnology part started to grow as a field, and then the career came out as a major in the universities, okay, I guess I'm gonna pursue biotechnology because it was a conjunction of biochemistry, biology, engineer, all in once.
Very interdisciplinary. You had a little bit of everything
in one career. As I say, we were the kind of guinea pig, so it was very, very tough. We went from pure mathematics and physics to pure chemistry, pure biology, pure engineer. So when I graduated, I said, that's it, I want to retire. I don't want to study anymore. It was, to have an idea, we start 300 students, and we only graduate from that class 8.
Oh my.
So to have an idea how they were filtering us year by year.
So I can imagine that was a bit of a struggle. You were the first, like you said, first guinea pigs for this new program. It's an up and coming field, very new everywhere. And I guess so they didn't really thought it out how to like merge everything. Everything was, it seems like, taught like very separate.
Yes. It was a challenge for everybody, for the teachers, for the university, and for the students, because they were trying to decide what will be the background and then the major areas where the students actually could get more specific education. I remember that we became the 8 students. Actually, we ended up after the first year, we ended up being the group of 8. Like, that is even how we were called back at the university, because we were the 8 that survived the class experiment. And we were very close. And so the 8 of us actually we get into science, and most of us, except for 2 people, became scientists. So there was more, at that point, more science focus. So actually it was more training scientists than biotechnologists.
Gotcha.
So, and then I guess at the end, they realized, okay, we cannot just train scientists, pure scientists. We need to give a more broad background, or a more broad areas where they actually, after graduating, if for someone doesn't want to be a scientist, can go to industry or other areas. So it was a challenge.
And how long was this?
The major was 6 years.
6 years.
6 years to finish all the classes and the thesis, because after we finished the second year, most of us, we entered to work in a laboratory to develop our thesis.
Mm-hmm.
And we needed to publish our work, so that my first paper, scientific paper, was from my undergrad research. And then we wrote a thesis, and we needed to make an oral defense, like a regular thesis. So it was a challenge from day one. But the biggest challenge for me, because you were asking me about the challenge, is I came from a family that is low middle class in Argentina. So I'm not coming from a rich family. And at that point, my family was struggling with the economy. The good thing that we have in Argentina is that education is free.
Oh, wow.
So you go to college, and that is paid by the government.
Maybe one day that'll catch up
yes.
in the States.
So if I'm here, I'm very thankful to the government of Argentina, despite all that is going wrong with politics. The fact that we have free education is what gave me the opportunity today to be here. But despite the education is free, because I was going to study in another city, you need to pay for an apartment, you need to pay for
living,
food,
yeah.
living, transportation. And I remember that at that point, it was really hard for my family to pay for me to be in another city, because my sister, my oldest sister, was already in college in that city. So now I remember that when I look at my father, he say, well, if you go there, it's going to be tough for us to help you, and you cannot work, because actually it was so tight, the schedule of classes. We used to have classes from 8 in the morning to 8 p.m. With work in the lab, So it was a full-time student.
Non-stop, yeah.
And so it was no room for someone to work and study at the same time. So I told my father, I said, don't worry, I'm gonna go anyway, because this is what I want. And I'm gonna apply to every single fellowship that is out there, and I'm gonna make it. So, and I did it. So my message through all that is that when you want something, no matter how hard it is, if you really want it, you will find a way. And that is how was my first step, how challenging it was. I was struggling with my family, the economic situation of my family at that time, and going to a career that was new, so they were given no air to breathe at that time. But then we finally graduate. And
so when you graduated at that point, what's your degree?
it was what we call is a licentiate in biotechnology. So it's this type of degree only exists in Hispanic countries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in Spanish is licenciado. But it's equivalent to a master degree here in terms that we have the college, but because we have to do a thesis, it was like a bachelor plus a master degree.
I'm curious, so here you are, you're relatively young going into this program, and all of a sudden, you know, you have such a strict schedule from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. How did you breathe? Like, how were you able to manage your time so that you wouldn't feel overwhelmed? Or was that a struggle that you had to go to, constantly feeling overwhelmed with the amount of classwork, lab work, and all, you know, papers and presentations?
It was tough, but because we get very close, this group of 8 at the beginning, it's like, say, we made our castle between us, and we support to each other, and because it was something that I really wanted so badly, and I was so happy and enjoying the science, the learning at that point, that I didn't care too much about the pressure. It was a lot of pressure. We were very tired all the time, just waiting for the summer vacation to go a couple days at home and then go back, because that was the only time that we had to fully dedicate it to the thesis and the lab work. But if I have to do it, I will do it again. I guess that was the reason why I wanted so badly that was kept me focused on my goal.
So it's really important to have motivation and that love behind
Yes.
what you want to do
Yes.
to keep you going, as well as it seems to be a good support system. Those 7 other students were very supportive and kind of like a family. And I know you mentioned that your family had, you know, economic difficulties, but were they supportive of your decisions to enter a scientific field and pursue that area?
Yes. They say, okay, we will be behind you doing whatever we can. The good thing is the situation was improving after a couple years, so they felt relieved at that point when things were start to get better in terms of the economy, but they were always supporting. I always, especially my mom, she was always behind me and so proud of always. Moms are always proud of their kids.
Besides the other 7 students, were there any teachers that really influenced you, really impacted your path into biotechnology?
Yes, actually, back in high school was my biology teacher. She was always kept by the way that I was so curious and so into science, that we used to talk about potential careers and what I want to do, and she was always very supportive with me to become a scientist. So yes, I guess she is in one of the teachers that everybody was given a little bit, that at the end made me as a whole. So yes.
So would you consider her one of your mentors?
I guess I had a mentor, and more than one mentor at every stage. She was one of my mentors back in high school, that's for sure. Then when I went to college, I selected my mentor right after we finished the second year. It was in the physics department where I developed my thesis in biophysics. And at the same time, I have my advisor was Dr. Gennaro, and a co-advisor, which was Dr. Silver. And Dr. Silver was one of the most influences, one of the most strong influences that I had, because he was the reason why I ended up doing my PhD thesis in Brazil.
Okay.
So when I was toward the end, I really knew that I want to leave Argentina, that I didn't want to study there. But I was afraid to come straight to United States to do a PhD, because I was never left my home, my country, and say, okay, let's do it in a small step. Let's go to Brazil, and if it works, then I give a big jump and go to United States. And toward the end, I remember that Dr. Silver, he was also leaving the university to pursue the postdoctoral training in Brazil, and he knew a professor in the parasitology department in Brazil. And this professor, Dr. Cancin, went to Argentina to give a seminar. So Dr. Silver introduced us, and because he was working in malaria, Dr. Cancin, at that time, and my thesis was not in an infectious disease, was actually working with human red blood cells, the membrane, and the malaria parasite grows inside the red blood cells. So I was interested in all the metabolism and all his work, so we started to talk, and before he left, I said, well, I may be interested to go to Brazil to do a PhD, and he said, well, when you are ready, you're almost graduating, send me an email, and then we can just start to talk. So that is how I ended up then landing in Sao Paulo doing my PhD.
So a mentor is not somebody that you can talk to and, give you advice for your day-to-day life and, advise your scientific path, but it's also a person that might have connections, might help you network to open up more doors in the future.
Yes, and also will help you to decide what will be the next step. And it's really nice that when a person is designing the scientific career, there are key things that you should keep in mind. One is connections and networking. You cannot become a great scientist if you just stay isolated in your lab with your work and not talking to anyone. Networking is essential. Always have someone that will help you to look beyond your next experiment. There is a line, and it's really good to have short-term goals, mid-term and long-term, because every decision that we can make, they will actually change the path in the mid-term and long-term goals. So every decision will make a huge impact in your long-term goals depending what you select. And having a mentor that will help you to discuss all that and see beyond the next experiment is really important.
So you mentioned that networking is a key factor in a scientific career. Can you tell us some ways that you networked? or that overall people can use to network and get their name out, get their interest out? How did you go about networking besides using your mentor?
Well, so when I was as an undergraduate student developing my thesis, I used to participate in conferences. So that is very important that you start to train your skills in presentations, even a poster or in short talk. And don't be afraid to introduce yourself to other professors.
Don't go to the conference and just present your work and that's it.
Exactly. If you stay isolated, again, if you stay in your world, you don't talk to anyone, nobody's going to come to you. Nothing falls from the sky, except the rain and the snow. You have to look up to the opportunities. And the only way to do it is introducing yourself. Be always aware about the right situation and find the moment to approach someone. Specifically, if you already know what you want to do, and you start to identify, for example, the laboratories where you want to go, sometimes it's not that easy that you will contact the person and you will land there. You need to go a little bit of work. You need to have someone that will introduce you, because that is sometimes the only way to reach the person. But conferences is the best place for the students to do networking. And sometimes you have these short courses for graduated students or undergraduate students that would like to pursue science, where actually scientists will be presenting. And so that is an opportunity to approach the teacher and see if you're interested in that particular area. That will be the way to let yourself know out there. But that at conferences, I guess, and short summer courses is the best way.
And I know here we constantly have well-known scientists and researchers come and do presentations here, and that's another excellent way for you to network. Just, go up and introduce yourself, and somehow, a conversation evolves and you might have similar interests, and all of a sudden he mentions or she mentions that there's a postdoc available, and
yes,
that's how
it works. Actually, especially with the life science seminar series, students are encouraged to go with the speaker after for lunch. So taking advantage of these opportunities and not just see that as an obligation, or I have to go out with for lunch with the speaker at least 3 times in the semester. It's not an obligation. Actually, that has a purpose. It's to give you the opportunity to do networking and
yet another
find
resource.
your next lab. So absolutely. I guess students need to start to change the way that they see things. Sometimes we put this as an obligation, so if it's not, nobody will go. But these are the small opportunities that we are putting along the way for the students to get in contact with other people and do networking.
You mentioned some of the characteristics of your mentor was somebody who helped guide you, who could help open doors, can help networking. What else? What other characteristics do you think make a good mentor?
Well, I'm going to describe my mentors. I have, during my career, different type of mentors. So I guess a good mentor for me was the person that was always accessible to me when I needed. Not the type of, and again, each person will work in a different way with a mentor. So what I will say is what it worked for me, but probably it's not the best for other people. I'm the type of person that I don't like people be over me all the time. I like more the type of mentor that you need to go to the mentor when you need it and when you want to talk, but not that he or she would be all the time coming to me, which is not the most common. But the mentor for me needs to be available when you need it, to talk about science, but also help you if you don't know how to balance your science with your life, especially with the personal life. Not that you have to mix things, okay? But sometimes we need to look at the students, and maybe they're struggling with something, and maybe they're not responding in the lab because there is something else. And without something else, and without crossing the line, sometimes it's good to ask, is everything okay? Do you need some time to figure things out? So a person that is for you there in the science, but also if something is going on in your life, the person will understand and will not see you as a robot. You're a person with a personal life. And one thing that I remember from my postdoc in New York is Dr. Schramm used to tell me all the time, happy people produce more. So if you see a problem, I mean, the mentor needs to be able to see beyond just the science, just the experiment, because sometimes the things are not going because there is something else in the way. So for me, a mentor, it should be someone that also can see beyond that. And all the people that was passing through my life, they were that type of person. But maybe because I select them in that way. Maybe it's a natural selection that you ended up working with people that will fit with your parameters. I guess a mentor is something very personal in the way that what will be your list to be a good mentor. But overall, what it should be common to all the types is that the person should be there when you need it, able to help you to design the experiment and help you to guide you beyond your PhD. In my case, I like to talk to them, what do you want to do next? Because I can train you to stay in academia, but if you want to go to industry, this is the path that you should go. It's not the same.
So with your graduate students, the individuals that you mentor, you make it something that you do to find out what their interests are and somewhat
yes,
cater to that. And that's something great because it does add that personal factor into it, because not everybody wants to go to academia, not everybody wants to go industry, you know. So having that field of communication open, that you can talk to them about your interests, whether it is being academia or industry, I think it's really important as well. I'm glad that you mentioned that. But going back, so here you are, you graduated with what's similar to here as a master's degree, and then you go to Brazil. You said it was the first time, I guess, away from home, like a larger distance
yes,
away from home.
yes.
And what position were you after there? What degree? Was that going to be a PhD?
A PhD.
A PhD. And would it be a PhD in a specific aspect of biotechnology, or?
Yes, it was. The PhD was in science,
Mm-hmm.
and the field is in relationship of the host-pathogen interactions. Was in the parasitology department. My thesis was working with the malaria parasite in the metabolism, working with a specific drug that we knew that was inhibiting the isoprenoid pathways in the parasite. So the field was into the drug discovery and metabolism in the malaria parasite. But the whole training was in biochemistry and parasitology.
And how long did that degree take you to finish?
In my case, I finished in 4 years and was around the 4 years. But actually, all the experimental data and all the thesis I finished in 3 years. But then I didn't want to present my thesis until I had a position, a postdoctoral position to move forward. So I kept working in the lab and finishing all the other aspects of the project and once I found a postdoc, then I went to my advisor, okay, this is the time, I can defend, I can leave. But in average, usually in Brazil is between 4 to 5 years.
4 to 5 years.
And depends on each person, each project.
Was it a challenge for you to move so far away from your family? I know there's probably quite a few individuals that are going to watch this video, and they're going pretty long distances away from home. And you said that you were very close with your family. So was that a little bit of a struggle being far away? And if so, what helped you relieve that homesickness? I
think I was a kind of person with homesickness, but again, I was so determined on my goal, what I wanted, that usually I don't care what I have to do as long as I get it. Of course, respecting other people's freedom. But I'm very determined when I want something. And so again, that was what helped me to stay away from my family. Learning another language, because Portuguese is so different from Spanish. When everyone's like, no, it's pretty similar.
It has the same root of Latin, but Latin is very different than Spanish.
Yes,
some people don't understand that.
No, and then you have all these slang that you will not find it in a Portuguese textbook. And
Brazilian Portuguese is a slightly different dialect than the Portuguese from Europe as well.
Yes. And even within Brazil, you have the Portuguese from the south is totally different from the center and from the north. So I was in Sao Paulo, which is a very cosmopolitan city. So it was people all over Brazil there, and some people even they were calling things differently, but they were talking about the same thing with different words. And so at the beginning for me it was so confusing, and I have to confess that I ended up every day, at least for the first month, with headache at the end of the day, because it was so hard trying to understand everybody. But again, I was so focused on my goal that I said, okay, we'll learn Portuguese. This one day I'm gonna look behind and say, well, it wasn't that hard. It was.
I can say it. I can definitely see the challenge. You know, you're going to Brazil, you're going to get your PhD. That means that I'm assuming most professors there would teach the classes in Portuguese.
Yes.
So you need to have a strong, understanding of the language, past classes and communicate with your now advisor.
Yeah, well, the good thing is my advisor was Argentinian.
Oh, so that helped out a little bit.
That helped a lot. But the other people working in the lab, the technicians, the other students, they were Brazilian. But they were so, they ended up being my family. So when you ask me what helped me was friends and the people in the lab, they were very supportive. So,
and how did you learn Portuguese? Was it just by ear? Did you go through Rosetta Stone, or you just try to memorize a lot of the different vocabulary and dialect differences?
Well, one thing that even helped me with English is watching TV. So I was trying to watch the news every day because people speak properly. And so every day was at 8 p.m. I was watching the news. That helped me to improve the Portuguese, and always the people in the lab and say, I don't care if you correct me, please do it. So they were correcting me all the time, and it was flowing. I don't know, I guess that always help you is you need to survive. And if you don't learn the language, you will not survive. Within university is fine, but you need to survive in the outside world. And that is what made me, okay, I have to learn, I have to learn, I have to learn. And I don't know, I was absorbing it. I cannot tell you actually one thing that helped. The only thing that I realized is after 6 months I was speaking fluently Portuguese, I was understanding.
Fantastic.
And I don't know how that happened, it was osmosis through my brain, but it happened.
Right. So talking about right now your time in Brazil and being in grad school and having graduate students yourself, what are the characteristics that make a successful graduate student? What do you see in your students right now that you're like, oh, that's great quality. I see you going on, you know, further into science. That's exactly what you need to do, or something in yourself.
Well, first of all, if you want to become a scientist, you must love science. You must love what you do, because it's a very demanding job. There is no time. I mean, we sign up to work X amount of hours, but we work double of that. Because sometimes you need to do an experiment which doesn't work, and you plan it to do it within 6 hours, and it takes you 20 to finish.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because graduate school isn't a 9-to-5 job. It might be an 8 to 9 o'clock job, depending on how many times you have to run a,
an experiment or.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that it's definitely different than getting a job and thinking that you're going to be home by a certain time. You might be, but you might not, and you have to be resolved to that aspect for the next how many years you're going to be in graduate school.
Yes, it varies a lot depending on the type of project that you are on it and the type of work that you do. In our case, for example, that we work with the malaria parasite, sometimes we need to come Saturday and Sunday because we cannot leave the parasite without taking care of them over the weekend. So what we try to do is make rotations. Okay, you're becoming every single weekend, okay, I can take over this weekend and you cover me the next one. But it depends, but in general, if you're thinking the grad school is a job from 9 to 5, you're going to the wrong place. Especially for the life sciences part. This is a job that takes you what it takes to get it done, no matter how many hours. And in order to do that and to don't become frustrated, you have to love it. And you have to have your goals very clear. One thing that I notice is today it's harder and harder to find students that they know what they want to do after. Or it's completely a black hole that is there, that is the future. And so in those cases, it's much harder to try to incentivize them or find what they like. Still, I guess it's a good option, graduate school, but maybe they will struggle a little bit more with these type of things that you need to spend so many hours. And again, the only way to get through if you really enjoy your work. And the most important is if you decide to go to graduate school, you need to find a lab or a project that really attracts you and say, this is what I love and really want to find out the answer. And when you are actually so engaged with your work, it's going to be much easier, the walk to the final line.
I definitely agree. When you really like something, when you're really like so deeply involved in it, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like this is a goal that I'm working for, and when I finally get that data and analyze it, this is going to be just show how much work and love I have for this subject.
Yes.
So thank you very much for saying that. So there you are, you're done with your PhD, you were able to get a postdoc, and you said your postdoc in New York.
Well, actually, I made a small stop into Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I went to UNC, the nutrition department, because how I ended up there. Well, when I was finishing my PhD, I was contacting people that I knew the work through my thesis, people that was working in the area of parasitology, and say, I want to do a postdoc with this person in the United States. I knew that I want to come here. The problem was, as always, they didn't have the money,
the funds,
to support a new postdoc. So they were waiting for the grant to be approved or to be revised in order to decide if they will take a new person or not. So that was the main reason why I put in hold my thesis to present it and defend it. So say until, because there's another thing. Finding a postdoc is not something that you will find it right away. So if this will be watched by a graduate student that is planning to do a postdoc, I recommend to start at least a year before you know that you will graduate, because it takes a long time to actually find the place that you want and make sure that that lab will have the funding to hire you. So after I was contacting all these people, they say, I really want to have you in the lab, but I don't have the funding right now. I say, okay, that's it. I'm going to change the area. I'm going to start to look for open positions already. So I found this position. It was totally outside the parasitology area. It was in a human genetic disorder, but it's still within the metabolism area. And it was an open position, so I applied and I was selected. But then, actually my husband was working at what it was at that time, the Tiger Center, the Genome Center in Rockville is the center that sequenced the, right today is called the Craig Venter Center. It was changing the name all the time. So he was working there, and his lab was moving to New York. And then Rockville, which is near Washington, D.C., to Chapel Hill was okay, but New York, Chapel Hill was a long distance. So then I decided, okay, I need to go follow something closer in New York. So after a year, I left. I started to make contacts in New York. I ended up working with Dr. Ron Schwant at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York.
So how did you balance your work life and your personal life?
Well, it's a tough question. Because for other people, I'm workaholic. But I don't see it. Okay. I don't know what they say that. So I guess it's the fact that my husband is also a scientist.
You could understand why, for instance, you can't, make it to the movies tonight because you have to finish running this, cell stain or something like that.
Yes, probably he will be in the lab with me doing this one. So that's the reason why. My life is pretty simple. I don't have kids, so maybe that is what, for me, is much easier to balance. My personal life, and my husband is a scientist too. And I am a workaholic programming. I assume that. But I always take the time to do what I like. So I'm a person that I can work many hours, but when I feel that I need a break, I take it. So I guess that is very important, that you learn how to read your signs. Say,
So you can't be a workaholic, but also make sure you make time for yourself when you need it.
Yes.
Don't work yourself to death.
Exactly. When I start to see the signs, I say that this is the time, let's take the weekend off, or make a small trip. I need to relax my mind. And sometimes it's happened that in the middle of the day I cannot think anymore, and it's totally useless for me to be in the office or in the lab. So I go for a walk, or I do something that actually will reset my brain.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because the work that you're doing is important. You need to do it. But how many mistakes you make when you're so overworked, when you're tired, compared to when you're not tired. So it's really important that you take that little bit of time for yourself in order to come back 100% and probably see things that you didn't see before just because you were so tired and overwhelmed with everything that was going around. So I'm glad that you definitely mentioned that.
And also I tell that to my students, that it's important. For me, it's not how many hours we work. It's the quality and how efficient you are during those hours. Back in New York, I remember that I was in a lab where we were 18 postdocs.
That's a large
yeah,
lab.
that is a large lab. So I had the opportunity to see different styles of work. So it was people that was coming at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, but leaving the lab at 2 a.m. It worked for them, they were very productive. Then I have a few people that were working just a few hours, and they were the most productive in the lab. So I guess that every people need to find their own time. And again, it's the quality of your work and how efficient you are in those hours. Know that you need to work 10 hours per day, because I can come to the lab and sit 10 hours and be zero production. And that doesn't matter. And you can have people that comes 6 hours and they do the work of 3 people at the same time. So, and I like to recognize that. Because some people need more time, other people need to balance that. But again, that goes from mentor to mentor and from student to student.
So how did you make it to Virginia Tech? And can you mention your current position here at Tech?
How I ended up here? Well, that was, how to put it in a nice way. I was looking for positions. I started to look for positions in 2009. The end of 2008 and 2009 was coincident with the biggest depression in the economy in the United States. It was when actually the economy was crashing. So it was just at that point, if you compare over the time, the academic positions open were drastically came down. So it was just a few positions for a lot of people out there looking for jobs. So it was, we went from, I remember some friends looking for a job before that time, and they were applying for a position, and so it was one faculty position for 100, 200 applications. During 2008, 2009, when I was applying, I received some letters saying, thank you for applying, but we got 600 applications. So it was like, okay, this is gonna be tough. So at one point I said, okay, I give up. I'm gonna start to look for positions outside United States. And so I remember my husband found this position. Usually for faculty positions, they are open between July and December. That is the biggest peak or the maximum peak that you can find more of the open positions. And this position was open in March, April that year, which is outside, is off season for looking for a faculty position. And my husband saw it, and was especially for people working in vector-borne infectious disease. And he told me, you fit perfect. Nobody can tell you that you're the perfect fit for this position.
And where was it?
When?
Where?
It was here.
Oh, it's here.
It was here. So I applied, and they called me. And when I came here, I was also at the same time looking for positions in industry. But when I came here, I fell in love with the town, with the university, with the department, the people, the environment. So after I left the first interview, saying I really want this position. I love it here. And 30 days later, I got the call. And I said, yes, I want it. I don't need to think about it.
So if you could have given yourself some advice while you were going to this path of graduate school, or if you currently could give one piece of advice to your current graduate students, what would that be? What do you think is that piece of information that just make life so much easier?
Yes. And actually, I'm going to quote one of the professors when I left Brazil. When she left, she did a postdoc in the United Kingdom. And she told me, I'm going to tell you something. Maybe someone will tell me that before I was leaving to United Kingdom, it was having my life much easier. It was, everything is going to be okay. And the tough times are going to pass. You will survive. So what I will tell a student to survive grad school is everything is going to be okay. Just dedicate to your work, and you will be successful if you want to be successful. It's not if it's your advisor wants you to be successful, your mom, or no, it's up to you. You reach your goals because you want to. Always find someone that will help you along that path. You cannot get there alone. So get through your mentor, a friend, people in the lab that will help you to go through the tough times. But keep your goals clear. Everything is going to be fine. Just keep going. And always ask for help. If you're struggling with something, ask for help. Still, mentors, we don't read minds. So I hope sometimes that we could do it, but we can't. So always ask for help.
I think that's an amazing piece of advice there. I think sometimes individuals might get a little bit intimidated that if they ask a question, perhaps the other person's going to think not so highly of that person's intellect or something along that lines. But I think in this field, we're all about asking questions, and we can't do it alone. We need to ask help.
Yes.
So thank you for that piece of advice. So hopefully the individuals watching this will definitely take that to heart and take all the things that you said throughout this interview to heart. Once again, Dr. Cassera, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview, this scientific journey project. It's really important for us to understand the different paths that individuals take and all the challenges that individuals have to overcome and yet be a successful scientist. So thank you once again.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.